Will you be delivered or will you be doomed? This is a simple question, and it has to do with the eternal destiny of every human soul. And today we'll see a foreshadowing of this in the fall of Jericho in Joshua chapter 6. This is Eric Slawick, the UWM Penn guy, and this is the Bible commentary. As always, if you like what you're seeing, I would ask that you hit like and subscribe in order to help the channel grow. And now, without further ado, let's get into the Word. And so today we're going to conclude the study of Joshua chapter 6 with the differentiation between the one woman and her family, or the one woman who accepted the God of Israel and then her whole family was delivered. We don't technically know if Rahab's family also accepted the God of Israel. It was like Lot's daughters, and we'll get to that. And then that being contrasted with the ultimate doom of the entire rest of the city of Jericho. So let's begin with verse 22 then. But to the two men who had spied out the land, Joshua said, "Go into the prostitute's house and bring out from there the woman and all who belong to her, as you swore to her." So here we can first frame this in the parallel to the famous story of the people in the days of Noah. Jesus himself said that as in the days of Noah, so will it be in the coming of the Son of Man. They will be eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage. And then the flood came, and now the second coming and the great tribulation will come for people at the final end of the world. And here we can frame this entire section as the city is just as the world will be burning all around the doomed inhabitants of the world, who in Revelation, and I'll put up an example here, are referred to as those who dwell on the earth, the earthbound, earth dwellers. The people of Jericho were earth dwellers. They were Jericho dwellers. That was their entire existence. They had a religion. It was a disgusting, corrupt religion by anyone's standard, involving child sacrifice, bestiality, ritual murder, etc. But that did not bring them out of their basically earthly concerns, bound by this one small city that they lived in, and as a result, they essentially set themselves up for this final destruction. And so, going forward into 22 and 23, then, we can look for the themes that, as Peter says, God is able to save the righteous. And he's referring to Lot there. Lot, similarly, was the lone believer in God, follower of God, in the entire unbelievably corrupt city of Sodom and Gomorrah. Again, murder, all manner of imaginable sexual immorality and theft, and every command. They broke every commandment in ways we can't begin to fathom in most parts of the modern world. And also the idea of election, where Paul says that Christians are elect according to, or Peter, Peter says that Christians are elect according to the foreknowledge of God. And Paul says that God chose his people in the beloved before and to receive every spiritual blessing in the heavenly places. We see the ultimate fulfillment of this for the foreshadowing example of Rahab here. And then finally, you can see the end of faith. This is the end, the conclusion, the fulfillment of the faith that Rahab had, the incredibly difficult trial that she had to undergo. Now, the ultimate fulfillment of our faith, or of Christians' faith today, and even of Rahab's faith, it says that people like Rahab in Hebrews 11 were seeking a greater country. The end of the ages came upon Christian believers today, and then ultimately that greater country is heaven, the new heavens and the new earth, the new Jerusalem. And so let's read verse 23. So the young men who had been spies went in and brought out Rahab and her father and her mother and brothers and all who belonged to her, and they brought all her relatives and put them outside the camp of Israel. This is probably, I assume, some sort of ritual concern that these people were Gentiles. They needed to, under the law of Moses, properly enter into the community. Now, we know that she ultimately did because we have, as I demonstrated in a previous video, the Rahab enters the genealogy of the Messiah, Jesus himself. So obviously she ultimately came under the law as an individual living on earth and attached herself to the Jewish people. And now the people of, as was the case with the people in Moses' day, it says, Noah's day. Noah, it says, was a preacher of righteousness. That, in a sense, that ark that he was building was the ultimate pulpit for him. And you can only imagine the sort of mockery and hostility that Noah generated as he proclaimed the coming doom of the world of his day. And I have alluded to throughout Joshua chapter 6, I believe, the reaction that the people must have similarly gotten as they marched around the city 7 times. And this was it. This is what the people had heard about, that Rahab said they were cowering in fear over. And yet now, here we are. As Jesus says, they're at the end of the age, they're at the end of the tribulation. Of the people that are in the tribulation, there will be a separation of sheep from goats, of wheat from chaff. And the chaff, the goats, will go into eternal destruction, prepared for the devil and his angels. And the wheat, the sheep, the genuine children of God, will go into the everlasting joy prepared for those who love God. And here we see a foreshadowing of this. Rahab enters into the people of Israel. The rest of the people of Jericho enter into doom. So, deliverance and doom. So let's move on then to verse 24. And they burned the city with fire and everything in it. Only the silver and gold and the vessels of bronze and of iron they put into the treasury of the house of the Lord. So here we have this idea of uncleanness. In Arabic, in Islam today, it's the word haram. The Hebrew word harem matches it. However, in the fulfillment of any sort of law-based religion, be it Judaism, Islam, whatever it might be, that's fulfilled in the gospel. You have, with any law-based system of approaching God, Judaism, Islam, Mormonism, whatever it might be, you have uncleanness is basically ritual. In all these religions, at least Judaism and Islam for sure, there's a heavy emphasis on ritual purity. Some of that for the Jews does come out of the Old Testament. However, Jesus himself had a remarkable encounter with the Pharisees where he was moving through the fields, violating a number of silly human regulations the Pharisees had heaped on top of the actual regulations of God, doing it on purpose to set up a confrontation with them. But Jesus himself has, in one of his encounters with the Pharisees, has a moment where he violates even the God-ordained ritual purity concerning food. And Mark adds the remarkable parenthetical statement that he actually, through this, declared all foods to be clean. He demonstrated he was the Lord of the Sabbath, the Lord of the law, the Lord of Israel. He had the divine right to nullify the force of the law whenever he chose to, because certain parts of the law were not demonstrating eternal principles. They were temporary restrictions, or the eternal principles they were demonstrating were not direct, as in you shall not murder is always a principle, but you shall not wear mixed fabrics, for example, had a particular purpose and in that time and place to keep the people of Israel separated from the danger of temptation of being drawn into the corrupt Canaanite cultures that here in Joshua chapter 6 they were commanded to destroy. Today, the Apostle Paul commands Christians to touch not the unclean thing. That this is a broader application and basically is any time, the parallel would be a situation where a Christian believer is around people or in a place where they are feeling a lure to sin that is overwhelming them. Then it says, flee. The New Testament says, flee from the devil. It says, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Or, in this case, flee from the temptation, and you will resist the devil, and the devil will flee from you. That is why the destruction of Jericho had to be so total and so complete. Because anything they left, these people were so wicked, so vile, that anything that they left in the land of this people and their culture would constantly draw them towards evil. That is not generally the case with people outside of Christ today. It has to reach a very particular point of depravity before a person is just inherently a temptation to evil. And so moving on to verse 25. But Rahab the prostitute and her father's household and all who belonged to her, Joshua saved alive, and she has lived in Israel to this day because she hid the messengers whom Joshua sent to spy out Jericho. So, to this day, shows that this isn't a fanciful account, a reconstruction, a mythology. It's another reminder that someone was writing this as a historical record later and was making a direct connection between the history he was presenting and the realities of life in Israel in his day. And so the historicity, the historical quality of the scriptures is seen even in little phrases like this, as one would expect from any carefully constructed historical account. Indeed, any book of history today will have this quality where a good historian will have depth such that the very historical quality of the work is conveyed throughout the flow of the narrative. And perhaps the most dramatic example of this, perhaps in addition to all the genealogies in the Old Testament and the beginning of 2 of the 4 Gospels, is the prologue of Luke. And I'll put it up on the screen here, and you can see that, first of all, the Greek in this passage is just remarkably complex. It's basically Attic scholar Greek, and not the Koine daily equivalent of sort of the English I'm using right now. And Luke was trying to set himself amongst the great historians of Greece and Rome and demonstrate that he had carefully researched and he was presenting the history of Jesus according to as it was relayed by the eyewitnesses, many, many eyewitnesses, at a time when people could have still double-checked his work, and yet this account was preserved by the corporate body of the church. Even the Apostle Paul himself quoted from this work. And this is what you have here also in the book of Joshua. Now, to move on to 26, because this is a very interesting sort of verse. And 25 also, we have then ultimately, of course, the fulfillment of that drama we've seen of Rahab, and the spies were faithful, the people were faithful, the covenant Rahab made with the spies was fulfilled on both ends. She protected them, they protected her. It's kind of transactional, but that's what human covenants are. It's not the one-sided divine covenant, as I spoke of in a previous video on Joshua chapter 2, I believe. But you notice that after to this day, it emphasizes that she hid the messengers whom Joshua sent to spy out Jericho. In the New Testament, it says two times, God is not unfaithful to forget the works that you do for his people. I believe that's in Hebrews. And Jesus says to the churches that I see the works that you do. Jesus says, whatever you do to the least of my children, that you do unto me. This is it. This is the idea right here. Rahab believed, and she demonstrated that faith by love for brothers and sisters amongst the community of God. And thus, God saw that. He was not unfaithful. He saw it, and he rewarded it. He delivered her life in the midst of all of the doomed in that city. So let's move on to 26. Joshua laid an oath on them at that time, saying, "Cursed before the Lord be the man who rises up and rebuilds this city Jericho. At the cost of his firstborn shall he lay its foundation, and at the cost of his youngest son shall he set up its gates." So first of all, the curse is total. It's final. It emphasizes the finality of it. And so you see this finality. Basically, hell is the ultimate cursed place. And in hell, in the book of Revelation, it says that the smoke of the torment of those who do not turn to Christ will go up day and night forever and ever. They will be tormented forever in the presence of the Lamb and of the holy angels. It's the most serious consideration you could ever consider. Now, there's an interesting footnote here to this verse, which is much later in the book of Kings. There's a blurb given, or a historical note given, how a man actually attempted to rebuild Jericho. And indeed, the text emphasizes all these centuries later, at that time, that at the cost of his firstborn, and the firstborn is named, I'll put it up here, he laid its foundation, and at the cost of his youngest son, he set up the gates. It's the word of the Lord will be fulfilled. The scripture says that the word that goes forth from God will not return empty. We see this again and again and again. Many parallels could be brought up, but hopefully we'll see them over time as we move our way through the Old Testament. And so let's wrap up Joshua chapter 6 then with verse 27. So the Lord was with Joshua, and his fame was in all the land. The first victory was critical in the ancient world for establishing the credibility of a military leader, a political leader. I mean, it's basically true today as much in military and political strategy now, that if you win the first battle, then you have established yourself as a winner, as a leader who, whether by God's power, your power, and usually a combination of the two. Obviously, it's always God's power ultimately, but in the eyes of the people anyways, you have what it takes. And Joshua has been established this way under God. As God had said, all the way back in chapter 1, "Today I will exalt you in the sight of Israel, so that as I was with Moses, so I will be with you." And indeed, he was. His fame was in all the land. He was with Joshua. God fulfilled that word, that promise. In the church today, you had originally the signs of an apostle, unique miracles that the apostles were given the power to perform to establish that they were, as the New Testament says, the foundation stones of the church. And then for those who came after them, instead of miraculous signs, leadership, you look to character, which was primarily the case with Joshua. I mean, miracles were performed under Joshua, but it was primarily about character. And so for leadership, if you're looking for a more in-depth treatment of this question of leadership, character and inheritance. You can go back and look at the leadership study from chapter 1. But basically here, it's suffice it to say that Joshua's character demonstrated that he was a leader that God was working with, in, and through. And today, any pastor that God is working with, in, and through will demonstrate the character that is attendant upon such a person. So, at the end of the real first judgment in the book of Joshua, as always, I would ask you, are you the delivered? Are you currently the delivered or the doomed? Because as long as there is life and breath, there is hope. If you are the doomed, you can today turn to Christ by grace through faith and not of works, and become the delivered. And if you are the delivered, then you can continue to praise God in the way that Paul did in the book of Ephesians. Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, who has blessed us with all blessings in the heavenly places. And so until next time, this is Eric Slawick, the UWM Penn guy, and this has been the Bible Commentary.